Welcome back to another episode of Student of the Game. We're going international today. I've got a really fun guest, Anita Phillips, lawyer, consultant, coach, and she has something coming up that I can probably assure most people listening to this, most people you know, have never attempted. Anita Phillips, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brad. Good to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Appreciate you being here. So real quick, this is going to sound weird, but Anita and I share a brother, but aren't brother and sister. So I'll let you sit on that a little bit. But in September, there was an episode coming to America with Greg Johns. He was the international student that came to our home and lived. And this is Greg's sister, Anita. Anita, happy to talk to you. This episode is for people that think they have goals, but maybe should have bigger goals. Or maybe you have a goal that is so big, it kind of scares you. Maybe you want to do something that when you tell your friends and family, they think you're nuts. Today, we want to challenge the listener with just really, really, really big goals. Not average goals, but the question that I like asking my team, the question I like asking people on the podcast, questions that I like asking my family members. Wouldn't it be amazing if? And then let's fill in that blank. Anita, you're about to do something. I read this, by the way. You're about to do something that on the website of this race you're about to embark on, it says each competitor must have personal accident insurance covering search and rescue costs in France, Italy, and Switzerland. The listeners want to know more. So you have to have insurance on search and rescue. So tell the listeners a little bit about who you are, where you grew up, what you're doing now, and let's get into this conversation.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Well, like Greg, I grew up in the UK, in a town in the southeast of the UK by the sea. I studied in the UK and then also in Paris, and I've been a lawyer for 22 years. I'm now an executive coach as well. I've done a lot of traveling. I really caught the travel bug quite young whilst I was studying, actually. And it just opened my eyes to the whole world out there, I guess. And also the idea that the more you pare things back, the richer the experience became for me. So, I would be traveling with my backpack around Southeast Asia on a few dollars a day. This is back in the 90s. And I just found I was meeting these amazing people, doing these great things, but just living so simply. And I guess that sowed a seed for how I wanted to live my life later on. And I've kind of recast that, I guess, in my own way now, living in the French Alps, in the foothills of Mont Blanc. In between those two life experiences, I, as I say, became a lawyer. I've lived the sort of city life in London, Paris, and also worked for 6 years in Hong Kong. And so I've really sought to change things up. I've kind of gone really from extremes, I guess. But what I'm doing here next week, in fact, exactly in a week's time, is I'm going to be doing a really famous trail race called the Ultra Trail de Montblanc, the UTMB. It follows a course all the way around Mont Blanc. So Mont Blanc is nearly 5,000 meters high. So what's that in feet? 15,000. But I don't go to the summit of that. I'm going up and down mountains all around it, around France, Switzerland, and Italy, and then back into France. And the reason we need insurance is it's pretty treacherous terrain. I actually had to check my insurance the other day. It's funny you noticed that, just to check that I had the adequate cover. There's also a long mandatory kit list. We have to be prepared for all weathers. I've got bags full of different kit and different food for my husband, who will be supporting me to try and get around the course. So he's going to be travelling in our camper van from France into Italy and then into Switzerland, and try and sort of meet me at different points to give me the food and the clothing I'm going to need. But yeah, the race is 176 kilometers. It's 10,000 meters of vertical elevation. So what's that? 30,000 feet. I'll quit doing the comparison soon.
It's a lot. No, we need to know the translation.
It always sounds more impressive actually for an American audience. So yeah. Right. And there are various time cutoffs throughout it. So you can be barred from carrying on if you don't make the time cut. But the final time cut, assuming you've made the previous ones, is that you need to arrive back in Chamonix 46 and a half hours after starting. So that's my absolute cutoff. Because the race starts at 6 p.m. In Chamonix, it means I go straight into the night. I will hope to arrive in Italy early the next morning, maybe in time for some sort of breakfast, 9, 10 o'clock. And then I go on to get into Switzerland, and then back into France. So I have to do 2 nights. And that's what's tough, because it's 2 nights with no sleep, on my feet, going up and down mountains. So yeah, it's a pretty big challenge. And I suppose I should add that I'm 48. I only started trail running a few years ago. I did my first trail race 3 years ago. I got into it when we moved here. I was never really sporty. That was always my brother's bag. He was the sporty one. I was the studious one. But it's strange. I just enjoyed it as a sort of form of discovery of this amazing environment that we live in now in the French Alps. And I guess it's just kind of crept. I sort of think I did my first trail race 3 years ago. How on earth am I doing this thing, which is kind of the most prestigious trail race on the circuit? But yeah, I qualified somehow, and now I'm just trying to get myself mentally and physically ready to do it next week.
That is amazing. So first of all, you started this 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, what you didn't start 3 years ago was your mindset, right? Your adventurous, but take me back to, you're living at home and your mother, and Greg is coming to America. Is that about the same time that you started traveling? Like, did Greg inspire you, or is that something that your mom has always instilled in you guys, of adventure and chasing your dreams?
Yeah,
Where'd that come from?
that's it's an interesting question, because Greg moved over to America and built a new life in permanence over in the States for study and then for work. And now, we've just been over to visit and had a great time. And it's wonderful to see the life he's built over there. I was in my own way traveling, but in a really different way. I was wanting to explore as many places as I could, but never really in permanence. Even when I went to study, I studied near Paris for a year in the 90s as part of my degree. And then I went back to work in Paris for my law firm in the early 2000s. But those were only sort of 6-month to 12-month experiences. And apart from that, I've done 2 world trips. So, put the rucksack on and just set off. I think the first time I did it on my own, and I was about 24, I think. I'd done law school and was going to start at my law firm, and I wanted to take a year just to do something completely different. So I traveled around South America and then across to New Zealand, Australia, China, and Southeast Asia. So that was that trip. And then with my husband David, after we got married, so this is going, I guess, back to 2008, we set off. We just wanted to kind of spend a whole year traveling together and do a sort of north to south and then a circumnavigation. So we hatched this plan to travel to Alaska and start in Alaska. And then we traveled all the way down to Ushuaia, to the bottom of Patagonia overland. And then we set off on trains across Europe. We came back to London and set off on trains as far as Beijing, and then went to Japan, New Zealand, Australia. And then we did a huge trip all across the States. We bought a 1986 Ford 150 pickup truck in San Francisco. It wasn't very reliable, but it was a cool experience to travel across the States in that.
Well, I think that was the time when you guys came through and there was a 3-on-3 basketball tournament David played with us on it.
I think that's still imprinted on my husband's memory.
Well, he was a champion. I do know that. He has won a championship basketball tournament. So
yeah, I'll have to remind him of that. I think that might be thanks to his teammates, not so much his.
Yeah, we'll agree with that. Okay, so first of all, I am so inspired listening to your story, because so many of us, I think, just get caught up in the cyclical day to day of like, well, my kids go to school here and they're going to go here for 8 years or 9 years or 12 years, and this is where I'm going to live. And the thought of just picking up and starting over from scratch each time, that takes something inside of you and inside of you both that most people don't understand. But there's so many similarities too. It's like, when I got into real estate, I had no idea where I was going to be 21 years later. We've started our own company. There's investment properties. There's groups that we've been a part of. There's travel that we've been a part of for our business. But all of it at the moment felt like risks. I just talked to my team yesterday about associations and groups, and who are you associated with? What groups are you a part of? And first of all, what you're about to do, Anita, is there's no comparison to what I'm about to say. I'm telling my team, let's take some risks and go be part of a new group, a new association. Go put yourself out there and go meet some people. And here you are traveling all across the world. So there are some similarities, as you break it down, there's some similarities. And at the end of the day, I think you have to believe in yourself. You have to take some risks, and you have to own it. And you have to have this vision. So I want to get into the podcast a little bit where we talk about, mastering the fundamentals. Let's talk about the fundamentals to what you're doing. Let's talk about falling in love with practice. Like you've done so many different things. How do you fall in love with, what are you falling in love with? Are you falling in love with the travel, the adventure? Is it the people? Is it the experiences? And then ultimately winning at the game of life and what that looks like. But your background is one that is definitely admired. We could probably talk the entire hour just about your experiences and how fun those are. I'm going to introduce you to another friend of mine, Scott, with a podcast, Inspire Campfire, because he talks about some amazing, amazing adventures, and you would fit right in there. But let's get into mastering the fundamentals. Fundamentally, okay, we're talking to small business owners here. Fundamentally, what does it take to understand living a big life, setting big goals, taking risks, going after the adventures? Maybe we're talking to that person who's stuck right now, who's kind of been in their job for 3 years, 4 years. You just started trail running 3 years ago. Maybe somebody's been in their job or their career for 3 years and they just haven't had that breakthrough yet. What are the fundamentals that you usually talk about when it comes to, living the life that you're living right now?
Okay, well, I think the very first one, and this can sometimes be quite hard because we have a natural tendency to be hard on ourselves, but the first one I think is to have self-belief. And we don't need to have much, but I think if you're setting big goals, or there's something that you've, had that you really want to do, or you want to change up, or it could be to do with work, it could be to do with a hobby, it could be to do with sport, it could be to do with a relationship, but something you want to change or go after or do, you've got to have some self-belief about it. And I do think that we can all draw on a bank of experience, and that doesn't have to be in the same sphere at all. In fact, if you're going after something big, a big change, it's very likely not going to be in the same sphere. This is going to be unknown territory. But I really believe that if people can just allow themselves to open that door, just nudge it open and go, yeah, I'm going to back myself a little bit here and have the self-belief. And I was reflecting on this, and I think there are two life skills that many adults experience that I think we could draw on. There's one, which is driving. If you think about it, driving is totally an example of going out of your comfort zone. I mean, it's a multifaceted, high risk, skill. And yet most of us learn to do it. And we don't just learn to do it, we learn to do it without thinking, because we do it so much. And we get good at what we do, and what we do, we become. And I think we have to just make sure that what we're doing is what gives us passion, and, it's what we want to do. But going back to the driving example, you learn at 17, it's normalized. We don't really think of it as such a dangerous skill because everyone's doing it. But actually, taken in isolation, I think, if you were to tell someone you're going to learn to do all these things at the same time and drive down the street and actually avoid an accident, an injury, to yourself and others at 17, people would go, really? Can I do that? But people do. And the second one, I think this is for the female listeners, is childbirth. I mean, I think childbirth is the absolute prime example of going into the unknown and doing something that is unlike anything else, at least for the first time. Yet again, it's socially normalized, and, many women do it. So I think those are two examples that are very generic. I think everybody has their own examples of things they have done And that could be in a completely different sphere, as I say, but just to give you that self-belief.
Yeah. Before we go into the next ones, Anita, I want to interject here for a second. So what I took out of that is when a lot of times we don't have confidence if we haven't done something big, right? Like we're asking people to think big right here, and a lot of people haven't experienced maybe some of the things that you have. You know, what's big to you may be different for somebody else. I remember hearing the women's basketball coach at Duke University, Kara Lawson, talk about handle hard better. And she talks about life doesn't get easier. You know, when you go from one thing to the next, when you're in practice as an athlete, it's not easy. When you have kids, it's not easy. When you start a business, it's not easy. What happens is we start to handle hard better. And that's a phrase that she coined, is handle hard better. And what you're saying is, you know, so many people, I believe, especially in society today, because many people compare themselves to others, and that robs us of our joy. When you compare yourself to others, you lose that self-belief, because now it's a mindset of lack, of what I don't have. But what I heard you say, which I think is gold, is sometimes self-belief can be just in going back and remembering some of the hard things you've been through, and you're still here. You've made it here. And so handling hard better is a mantra that talks about fundamentally self-belief is critical in setting big goals. I love that. Keep going. But I wanted to make sure that the people knew that you don't have to do big things to have self-belief. Go back and look at the hard things you've already done.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I like that, handle hard better. I'll be thinking of that next week, actually.
For those that just joined us on the podcast or listen halfway through, exactly a week from this recording, and possibly when you're listening to this, Anita will be in a massive race, and we wish her the best of luck. So we're talking about mastering the fundamentals right now, and the first one's self-belief.
Yeah.
And I know you have self-belief on that race. So let's keep talking about the fundamentals.
Yeah, the second one, I think, is that most big goals, require a time investment. And how many people do you know have said, oh, I just didn't get that done, or I didn't have time to run that marathon, or to, you know, go for that job. Life gets too busy and there's too much in the way. And I have to say, for me, when I found out I qualified for UTMB in January, I did an audit of my life at that point, and I was doing 20 to 30 hours a week legal consultancy work on a big case and public inquiry in the UK. I was doing voluntary work here in the ski resort. I was helping manage, we've got a small rental here next door, so running that. I was also finishing my coaching diploma and looking to build my coaching business. And I also really wanted to carve out that precious time with family that was so integral to our move to France. And so it was non-negotiable. And the maths just didn't lie. I thought, well, I can't suddenly add 20 hours of training a week, which is really what it's been. So I actually made the decision to click pause on the legal work at that point. Now, that might seem a strange decision because that's my income stream, right? It wasn't an easy decision, and I had to back myself to do it. That I could make the life adaptations to make it work financially, but also that I could back myself, that I could step back into that work, you know, having clicked pause, you know, at some point in the future if I want to. And I feel so much better for having done that, because I think I risked doing nothing very well back in January if I just tried to do all this training on top of everything else I had on at that time. So I would encourage people, if you've got a big goal, you know, think creatively about what you need to do to realize it in terms of liberating time. I always say, I think time is our most precious asset, like more than monetary wealth or, you know, material gain. It really is the most precious thing we all have. And ironically, some of the most successful people I know have the least time. You know, they're just so busy. So actually, you know, if you can buy yourself some time, it hasn't been easy. I've, you know, definitely had to make some life adaptations, but it's been a really good decision for me because it's enabled me to enjoy the training. It's enabled me to finish my coaching diploma and launch my coaching business. So that would be another point I would make about setting big goals. Recognize how much time you might need to invest in realizing that goal.
And it's intentional. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like this fundamental belief that we have that, most big goals, most anything worth doing takes time.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a budget with money. You just can't keep adding things to it. At some point you have to take away, which is, I think what you said at the top of the show is, being simplistic, and living a simple life is actually pretty hard. It's saying no more than saying yes. And I'm sure you can attest to that. But what else? So we have self-belief, we have an intentional time investment.
Yeah, I'd say the next thing is you need to have a plan. There's no point having a huge goal without having a plan to realize it. And that plan often involves breaking things down into manageable chunks, because oftentimes a big goal can just seem all too difficult, all too complicated, and it's easier just to park it. So I would say 2 examples. When my husband and I decided to move from Hong Kong, which we loved. We had great careers over there. We had a great life. Our kids were thriving. They were 6 and 8 when we left, but we just felt we owed it to ourselves to at least see whether we could make a go of it living here in the French Alps. We bought a little holiday home a few years prior to that, which we were visiting, but we didn't really know anyone in France. The kids didn't speak French. And it seemed crazy to resign from our jobs and move out here with no prospect of work. And, us both having rusty French at best, and our kids not speaking a word. But we just felt, let's do it. But the way we did it was to make a plan. That plan involved buying some financial freedom, because we didn't know where work would come from. We needed to get our girls into the local school, into the system. We needed to complete the various administrative tasks that needed to be done to move over here. And I guess we just broke that down into stages. I remember my husband he loves Excel. He had this great spreadsheet on the go, but it just made it manageable. And it sort of converted it from a pipe dream actually into this realistic life goal that we could move. So I would say you have to have a plan. With UTMB, obviously, it's a massive challenge. So, I've had to have a training plan. I've devised that myself. Part of my kind of cost cutting, I guess. I haven't had a personal trainer or a coach. I've tried to do research, tapped up friends, and got input, and I've made a plan. And actually, once that plan kind of is set in train, I found that the easy bit. I started with, and I'm not lying here, a 5K run as my training, and I've built up to 190K. So I think that's sort of 3 miles versus 110 miles, so you can see it. If you told me 6 months ago you're going to, do 190 Ks in a week, I would have said, there's no way, I just can't do it up and down mountains. But actually, doing it very gradually, following a plan, it's become doable. So that would be my 3rd point. My 4th point is get support, and that really ties in with your point of relationships win. We are the sum total of the people in our lives, and we have to lean on people. People love to help. I think that's really what people love to do. They actually, at our core, we like to help people. We like to feel useful. And so I've just been tapping up everybody I know for nutritional advice, for training advice, for sporting, strength advice. With UTMB, I went from, really knowing very little at all to having to just master it in a short space of time. So I've had to lean on others. So that would be my other point. We do all have a network, and it's always worth investing in that network, because you never know when you might want to call on someone's expertise.
Absolutely. Time out. Student of the Game is brought to you by Noll Team Real Estate. Our mission is to eradicate mediocre real estate transactions. On your largest financial purchase, you shouldn't have to deal with average. We do this by helping you save time, reduce your stress, and helping you keep as much money in your pocket as we can. You can help us out by introducing us to your friends or family who want to make confident real estate decisions, whether buying, selling, building, or investing. At Noll Team Real Estate, we are connected to a group of realtors who sell 1 in every 8 homes in North America. If you know someone moving out of your area there's a great chance we can connect them to somebody we know, like, and trust. Remember, relationships win. Now back to the show. I love these fundamentals because as you're talking through them, self-belief, a time investment, needing a plan, and getting support. The person that's listening right now who maybe just wants to go start their own business, these 4 things are fundamental. What we say all the time is strategies and tactics can change. Fundamentals never will. It never will change that you have to have self-belief no matter what you want to do. It'll never change that if you want to do something big, there's a time investment. It'll never change that having a plan is better than not having a plan. It'll never change that getting support is a massive piece to making progress. And I think there's this culture right now where it's just grind, grind, grind. I'm going to do more. I'm going to do, and it's like throw everything in at all costs. And I think, action is good. Taking action is good. Having a plan with no action is worthless. But I think getting that support, having relationships, it's having an accountability partner. I don't care if you're a small business owner and you're trying to, grow your network, find somebody who's well networked and go to an event with them. Like at the first thing you can do is you can go to a networking event. You can go meet people and go with somebody. That's at the very basic level of getting support. Now you're talking about this UTMB race where you are going to put your body and your mind through something that most people have never had to do. And we can use that same framework, those same fundamentals into our everyday life. I'm loving this conversation. We could talk about so many things, but let's talk about falling in love with practice. Like what is it? How are you falling in love with practice as it relates to this big race, this big goal? And let's talk about the ultra trail running. So by the way, you went from, what did you say, 3 miles to 110, 100. So have you run 110 miles before?
I've run 110 miles in a race last year. I was very injured for about 80 kilometers of it. And I just carried on. And I just told myself, one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, just keep going, keep going. So yeah, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't easy. But yeah, that's been the progression, if you like. Now, obviously next week, I've got to add another 66 kilometers onto, the most I've ever done before, which feels huge right now. And it's going to feel huge, by hour 30 odd of the race. But I've got to trust that I've done enough in terms of training to be able to do it. And I suppose in terms of falling in love with the practice of ultra running, I would say there are no shortcuts to growth, because ultra running involves, being on your feet for a long time. So you've got to put the hours in the training. I would say that the journey is the practice and the destination is going to be the race. So, you've got to enjoy the journey because it's most of it. The destination, hopefully next week, will take care of itself because I've, taken the journey seriously. But I mean, who knows? In terms of breaking down, though, what I've done, I would say in terms of ultra running, I've needed to build my aerobic fitness, my core fitness. So that's been modulated training. As I say, I did the training plan myself. My husband helped. He's not a trail runner, but he loves, the science of sport. But we just got a book and tried to sort of work out what I might be able to do in terms of number of hours per week. And I think this applies to lots of sports. You start small, you build up in 4-week blocks. So you do build over 3 weeks, and then roughly cut that sort of distance and elevation in 2 in week 4. And that's where the gains are made in the sort of rest week. I'm a
Time out. I'm interrupting. You said the gains are made in the rest week.
Yes.
The gains are made in the recovery.
Correct.
Okay, so I want to talk about fitness for a second, because I've had this thought or this idea, and I want to test this theory out on you. When it comes to, let's just say, self-awareness, I've talked about this with my team and in our family. It's like, so self-awareness, what's fitness mean in your relationships? Okay, fitness in your relationships to me is the amount of recovery time. So here's what we're going to do. Anita, you and I are going to go out and we're going to run 3 miles. Okay. And maybe I run faster than you.
Probably will.
And then after 3 miles, I'm going to be sore and I'm ready to stop and I need to rest for a day. And after 3 miles, I just beat you in 3 miles, but you're ready to run another three. To me, the shorter the amount somebody needs to recover tells me how fit they are. And so from a self-awareness, if you're managing a team, or you have, people you're working with, or you lead somebody, which is everybody here, you either lead your family, your coworkers, your friends, you lead somebody, you have to have self-awareness.
Mm,
And I believe fitness in your emotional intelligence, fitness in your self-awareness is the amount of time you need to recover. For example, I say something to my wife, I shouldn't have said it.
mm,
And instantly, or within a couple minutes, I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
mm, mm,
When I was younger, maybe it took me a day to realize I actually did something stupid or something foolish that I shouldn't have done.
mm,
So when you're talking about fitness, you just said, okay, I'm gonna ramp up, and then I'm gonna recover. I'm gonna slow down. And that actually builds strength, and it builds endurance. And so to me, if you're thinking about a business and your hair's on fire, you have too many things going on, the world is just moving too fast, stopping and slowing down, spending time to think, something that we called forced reflection,
mm.
actually makes you go faster. Simplifying your life makes you go faster, makes you stronger. I love that point. I could talk about that forever, but I want to get back to your trail running here, because I think there's so many similarities. So fitness is a big part. If I go back and look at my business, sorry to keep going on this for a second, but I've gone back and I've looked and I've showed my team this. Everybody wants to grow their business. Everyone wants to grow, every year, 10%, 20%, 30%. I want to grow at just the sake of growing. I want to go back and look at the 21 years. I can actually see that there are about 6 plateaus. To be honest with you, there's about 6 plateaus where my business was flat. It
Mm,
was either flat or went down or something happened. And when I went and analyzed that, it's exactly what you're talking about. Those years on the plateau is where I actually grew.
mm,
Those years on the plateau, when I struggled, when I was working,
mm,
when something happened, when I hired somebody, and when my income went back because I had to make an investment in my business, that plateau then had another year of gains after that.
mm, mm.
And so it's very similar to exactly what you're talking about. Keep going. I'm getting excited because there's so many similarities.
Okay, so there is that sort of building volume that I mentioned. I've also had to do, for the first time in my life, strength work. Simple lunges and squats with increasing weight, stuff I just do at home. I'm not a member of a gym or anything, but that has really helped, I think, build the sort of strength in my legs, not just to run, but also hopefully to withstand injury. The terrain is really challenging, and you can easily roll an ankle, turn a knee, fall, and I need to be able to recover from that. So I think the sort of strength work has been integral to me avoiding injury. Actually, the more I read, people of sort of my age, women in particular, but I think this applies to us all, in order to be fit into our sort of 60s, 70s, 80s and beyond, we need to be doing those sort of simple strength exercises now. So I could recommend to everybody, do some simple squats and lunges at home twice a week, and you'll be able to climb your stairs when you're 80. So that would be my tip. The other thing I've been doing really for the first time is stretching, to try and, again, prevent niggles, prevent injury. One luxury I have allowed myself is a really great physio, and I've been seeing him every 3 to 4 weeks, and I think he's helped me keep injury free. So that sort of fitness piece, physical fitness piece, I think falls into aerobic base, strength work, and stretching for me. The second part of ultra running that is so important is nutrition, because you have to keep going for a really, really long time, and you need to be able to fuel your engine whilst you're running, and that's not easy. So there is race fueling. So I've got bags full of, I think I mentioned at the start, gels, bars. I've obviously experimented with things that I can keep down whilst I'm, trying to, demand a lot of my body. I've also taken some supplements for the first time in my life. So protein powder, whey protein, and creatine. And I think that has helped build my muscles again and help me recover as well. But who knows? You never know. But it is something I've done in terms of nutrition. The third part of falling in love with, I think, the practice of ultra running is mastering pace. It's really difficult with a race like UTMB and generally the trails around here. it's not really undulating. It's up and then it's down. And, it demands you really to walk fast, hike fast with poles uphill, and then try and make up as much time as you can on the downhills without, having a fall or an injury. So that pacing piece is really hard. It was interesting in America. Greg and I ran a marathon together on an island on Lake Superior. It was Greg's first marathon. I was really proud of him. But it ran. I mean, from the sort of starting horn, it just ran. And I said to him afterwards, I've not run, nonstop like that ever, because here the terrain is such that you naturally, unless you are in the absolute elites, who are going for the course records, you're not going to be running uphill. And even they don't run uphill at the end, they're walking. So the pacing has been tricky, but I'm very lucky to have the trails on my doorstep. So I've been able to replicate, that sort of pacing in my training.
I think real quick on the pacing, there's something for business owners to hear. Pacing is important. Pacing is important because what you said is like there's a change in altitude. There's a change in, I'm walking here, I'm running here, I'm making up time. In our business, in the real estate business, there's what's called the rest run cycle. There is a seasonality to our business. It doesn't mean that it's better or worse for a homeowner or a home buyer or home seller to enter the real estate market. What that means is, from a volume standpoint, from a practitioner standpoint, there is a cycle, there is a time of year, there's a seasonality to our business that it's important to understand. There is a rest run cycle. And when business is going, we're running downhill as fast as we can to make up time. And when things are slowing down, like, lifestyle impacts it. When kids go back to school, business slows down a little bit. People are getting into their normal fall routines again. It's important to rest. And by resting now into the third and into the fourth quarter, I can run a little faster. And that's important to understand. Whatever your industry is, if you're a landscaper, hey, there's a seasonality to it. You got to pace yourself, but know when you're running downhill and know when you're walking up with the sticks.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. And adapt the pace accordingly. Yeah. The fourth one, in terms of falling in love with the practice of ultra running, and I think this is probably the most important of all, is the mental strength, the mental training. I really love this about ultra running because I guess it's defined as, tolerating discomfort over a long period of time. And so it really boils down to, how much can you suck this up? How much can you displace this, feeling of pain or override it? And, our mental strength is much undervalued. I think, we can all quite readily lean out of things and go, oh no, I couldn't possibly do that. Whereas actually our mental strength is so much stronger than I think we would naturally acknowledge. Greg bought me Never Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And, he, I think, says, ultimately life is one big mind game and the only person we're playing against is ourselves. And I love that because I actually think we're in control. We're in the driving seat there. If the person we're playing against is ourselves, we can conquer, whatever's going on in our own heads. And I guess it links into drawing on past experiences. I don't have a bank of trail running experience, certainly at this length and this difficulty, to draw on to go, yes, I know I can do this. But what I can draw on is really tricky work projects or, challenging travel experiences that I had when I was traveling around the world and, 24 and, perhaps in situations that, could have turned out differently. Also, these life transitions, I'm at each stage going, well, I've done this, therefore, I've got to back myself that I can do this totally different challenge. And I guess, Brad, you say you draw on in your business, your, youth spent playing sports and what you learned, in that capacity. And I guess for me, it's the reverse. I'm drawing on probably more of my experiences in study and in work and trying to apply those now to sport. But I do think coaching for performance in sports and coaching for performance in business are actually very similar. And I apply this in my coaching model and framework when I'm working with clients. Ultimately, our performance in anything boils down to our potential less interferences. And I love that kind of very simple equation. And actually, the interferences are often those going on inside our own head. And we just need to, have the strength to acknowledge them and to tamp them down. And to, I think as Abby, your sister, said on her episode, thoughts and feelings and beliefs are not facts. They are just that. They are thoughts and beliefs and feelings. They don't have to define us. They don't have to limit us. But if we do let them, define us, they do become facts, they become self-fulfilling. So, the mental piece is so important. And I didn't think that is translatable to anything we're doing in life, whether that's work, whether it's sport, whether it's relationships. The mental game is so important, but often so overlooked, actually, and under-nurtured.
I love this. I could talk about this forever, Anita, with you, because I'm a firm believer in it. And, we talk about this a lot with my kids, and we say, the body has limits, but the mind is limitless. And the body does have limits, but the mind is limitless. And so it's really important to get in that mind gym and to flex that muscle. And, it's almost like, Bannister's 4-minute mile. Sometimes we can get our limiting beliefs from other people's. Sometimes we can have unlimiting beliefs from other people as well. When we see somebody accomplish something and say, I can do that, and my goal at Noll Team Real Estate is to share with my team what I did to get to where I'm at in 21 years and have them do it in 10. They're not going to do it in 2. Nobody's going to do what I've done in 2 years, but in 10, if I can cut that down and help them out, I think that mental strength, sometimes we can rely on other people, or at least to unlock some more potential within us. And you just made some really good points right there. But for the sake of time, let's get into winning at the game of life. So, with what you're doing, I mean, you're well accomplished. You've had a phenomenal legal career. You've taken your family all across the country. You've put them in a position of discomfort. I think we've said this on the podcast before. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that's what it comes down to. The more you can get comfortable being uncomfortable, the further you're going to go, the more you're going to be able to hit your goals. But when it comes to winning at the game of life, we talked about mastering the fundamentals, falling in love with practice, and you gave us so many good nuggets. Winning at the game of life, from the outside looking in, Anita, somebody would just think you're already winning. Like the things you're doing, maybe it scares somebody and they're like, no, that life isn't for me. But the lessons and the adventures, you are winning right now. And I want to affirm to you, I know this is going to air during your race, or people are going to listen to this after your race, but you are going to do amazing. Just because I can see it. I know your mindset. I know you've put the framework in. You're coaching yourself up. You have a great support system. So, kudos to you. And I just want to affirm that you're going to do amazing things. You believe in the process, and you definitely are a student of the game. And I'm glad you're on here today. But what does winning at the game of life look like for Anita?
Well, first, thank you for that, because this all helps to kind of give me that self-belief. So thank you. But winning at life for me, it means spending precious time with family and friends. It means living a simple life in the outdoors. I love traveling around in our camper van and, just packing up the basics. I think that sometimes when I'm at my happiest, actually, and just camping wild somewhere. I mean, it's so not what my brother likes. We laugh about it. He would be in the lodge for sure. But I'd be in the camper van, in the pop top. And I think the third thing is doing meaningful, purposeful work. We all have to have purpose, and we can find purpose in many different ways. I mean, on paper, I've stepped back from my career and I've pursued other things, and I've compromised that. I mean, actually, I'm earning less now than I did when I was a trainee solicitor back in London 25 years ago, which seems crazy, doesn't it? But actually, I feel my life is richer for it. So yeah, it's not for everyone, the path I've taken, but I guess I figured out it was for me. And I guess ultimately winning is when those things are in balance, when, I'm spending time with family and friends in the outdoors, and I'm also managing to juggle this, meaningful, purposeful work, which is now for me executive coaching and life coaching. And I think I've managed to build sufficient time and place freedom into my life here that means I can have a balance with those things. And I work remotely with clients who are located all over the place, in different countries, and I'm able to do it from here. And so that's given me that flexibility, which for me is really important.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, keep doing what you're doing. This has been selfishly, this has been fun for me catching up with you. And so
Too.
this podcast has been built off of relationships win.
Yeah.
To do what you're doing, to pick up and just move to a new country, to move to a new setting. The girls were, what'd you say, 6 and 8, your kids, and so to go somewhere where you don't have relationships, you have to invest in that community. A sense of community is also what gives us purpose. So as we talk, relationships win. And the kids these days say, give this woman her flowers, which is the accolades and the appreciation that we share with you. So I'm going to give you some flowers for a second for jumping on this podcast and talking to me. I'm going to give you some flowers for this race. You need to be celebrated. You are celebrated. You're a queen. I appreciate it. But in the game of life, we believe relationships win. Who is somebody you want to send some virtual flowers to? Who's somebody that's been in your life that has helped you get to where you are today?
Okay. Well, number one, it has to be David, because, we are on the same page when it comes to these big life changes. We can squabble about tiny things, but when it comes to the big stuff, we've really been, together. And I think that's enabled us to make those changes and switch life up just as they've kind of got comfortable. Whether that was moving from London to Hong Kong, or Hong Kong to here, or the traveling we've done, I think we've egged each other on. So yeah, he would be my number one, and he is going to be running his own ultra marathon of some sorts next week when he's kind of supporting me on the route. It really will be a team effort. So yeah, he's my number one. If I'm allowed a couple of other little roses, I would
Go for
say
it.
I've got 2 friends, Sophie and Laura, who really helped give me the travel bug, and that really changed my life. So a shout out to them. And I would say Justin D'Agostino for the career. He's CEO of the firm I've worked with and for, and that's been an amazing legal career. So thank you to him for his vision for work and what the career can be. And then in terms of the trail running, 3 girls here: Tamzin, another Sophie, and Steph. They really helped me with it. They've been amazing supporters and guidance. So thank you to them.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks for the shout outs. And what do they say? You can go fast alone, or you can go far with a community, and you're going far. So from student to lawyer to consultant to coach to ultra trail runner, you have accomplished a lot. And I know you well enough to know that you're not done yet. And so my encouragement is you just keep going, keep being a light for people. Thank you for being on the podcast. How can the listeners help you out, Anita? How can people help you out, whether it's with your coaching business or projects that you're working on? How can we follow you, connect with you, and how can the listeners help you out?
Okay, thanks. Well, first thing, I'm actually fundraising as part of this race. A London friend, her daughter has been ill for 4 years, and I'm raising money for her special name trust, which is part of the Children Cancer and Leukemia Group charity. And I have a Just Giving page. It will be open for the foreseeable. It's not going to end next week, and it will be open. But it's a Just Giving page. Anita Phillips, I think it's UTMB 2024. You can find it. But that puts everything in sharp relief when I think about what they're doing, and the challenges they've got in their day-to-day life. So that would really help me. Otherwise, I love meeting people, whether it's virtually or in person. If you've been interested or have any questions about what we've discussed today, then you can find me on LinkedIn. That's my main work channel, I suppose.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being on the podcast today. You are definitely a student of the game. You are living a life of abundance, growth mindset. I love what you've shared. I'm going to go back and make sure that not only I listen, but my kids need to listen to this. And I keep saying, I don't know how my wife and I would feel if Lindsay and I get approached by our children saying, I want to travel the world, and they're 17 and may or may not be coming back. I would have to wrestle with that a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think what we're talking about here is just, living a big life, setting really big goals, having a framework for it. And then if they have a community around them, I don't think greatness can happen in isolation. I think it has to happen inside of a community, and you've shared that today. So, thank you for being a guest. This is another episode of Student of the Game. We are supporting you on your race, and if you're listening to this post August of 2024, it's already happened. But the inspirational stories will continue. Thank you, Anita.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks for listening to Student of the Game podcast. Whatever game you are playing, I'm cheering for you. See you in the next class.